Okay, come on, where is everybody?
Good morning, online folks. Can you hear me?
Good morning, TJ. Yes, can.
Excellent. I want to go ahead and just let folks know that we're waiting a few minutes for some technology to show up. We have our owl and a few other things that we need to plug in. I'll leave this on so that you can hear us as best as possible. I suspect you won't hear others quite as well as you'll hear me, but bear with us for a few moments, please. You have an agenda and everything? Yeah. Thank you.
Twice before, isn't it? Really fast one. Okay, now. Print it on like 2x3 sheets of paper.
Needed those, for it.
You can read. So the only downside to that document is full of such great information, but boy, I mean, you have to have a good eye.
Yeah.
I do too, but I don't know that mine are actually strong enough for this document, isn't that terrible? Which are really good for my computer and load stuff. I found reading apps and I still can use it one way. Oh, it's contact lens. I read it plus fine. Yeah. Well, mine is, I didn't have my contract said I would be good at so I wouldn't do that. So I like to just keep working contracts in one system far away. It's a whole thing. So there's.
Hey, good morning, Michelle. Yeah, you're all set. I suspected you'd be showing up here soon.
It's not different. Better, but. Everything. Super.
So I think there are a few things that I could do right now that would benefit. Yeah, absolutely. So first off, this morning, and I waited until about 7 to make sure people didn't decide to go online, but those of you who do need to attend online have access to a link that was sent out this morning. You all should have seen that. Please just go ahead and click on that. If you don't already have a Miro profile, it'll take you about 30 seconds to set one up. And then you'll be able to drag and drop some sticky notes onto the board that you see there. Wait a few minutes for us, because once we kick off, I have a presentation that'll be for the benefit of both people in person as well as online that I'll share on my screen. But go ahead and get yourself to that page if you can, and get it loaded up for us. In the meantime, I want to direct attention for the folks here in the room to our wall over on this side. So we're going to be working on housing production strategy. Folks remember that we were working on 4 of them, right? A, B, C, and D. And what I have here is a couple of different things designed for us to get up and interactively provide some input, thoughts, and suggestions for how we can move forward with our housing production strategies throughout Tillamook County. So remember green, and I put up a little page here. Green means gentrification and displacement are unlikely. Move forward with this approach with the comfort that there are not going to be really unintended consequences for marginalized communities. Yellow means proceed with caution. This means that gentrification and displacement are possible, and it asks you to think through what are some of those mitigating strategies that we might want to think about to prevent that. And the third thing that we have is our red category. I think we kind of pink at the dollar store, so that's what I use. However, this stands for, and it means stop. Gentrification and these strategies is like, and we must implement mitigation measures to prevent that from happening. One of the things that I think you'll find is the level of impact that the strategy can have across the spectrum. Or low impact strategies, duplexes, triplexes, things like that. Those easily fit into the green category. They're not going to have that kind of displacement effect. Our more impactful strategies, things that are going to provide greater density, really change neighborhoods, have a great impact. They are going to be along these moderate, high-level categories. The housing production strategies document, if you have in your hand, sketches out how each of these strategies might fit in different neighborhoods. Certain neighborhoods might be gentrified by a strategy, while other neighborhoods would not. This is where your expertise comes. What I want to do help you is take a look at what we have at the table here. You get up and work interactively. You can just peel a sticky note right off of here. I've already put your feed that is reflected also in mine. Yellow is zoning changes. That's our A category. This, call it, I don't know, thing is regulatory barrier. B. And then the purple is our financial incentives and resources. That's C and D. So what I want you to do is 2 things. Number 1, let me give you an example right here. Take a sticky note. Think of a strategy that you've seen on your sheet that you've already preloaded in your mind and say, okay, I think that a zoning strategy is going to be a low gentrification, low impact strategy. So I'm going to go ahead and put on here A24. And I'm also going to make a suggestion about where in my mind I think this strategy could work. You might want to recommend a specific place, like a named place. But you might want to also think about a neighborhood typology that we have in Tillamook County. Let's maybe think about neighborhood 8, right? So naturally occurring affordable housing, stuff that was built before 1950 or 1960, stuff that needs to be weatherized and improved. Maybe I'd go ahead and put NOAA right here. But you might write Garibaldi. You might write unincorporated community, specific city, somewhere that you're familiar with. The beauty of this organization is that you all come from different places throughout the community and the county. You know what the challenges are and the opportunities and the neighborhoods look like in those places. This is the strategy we'll use today. Go use these 3 across each of the categories. We'll walk through it again when we start our exercise. Let's see if this gives Sarah enough time yet. Okay. Any questions about this? Yeah,
So A24 came off this sheet, right? Is that correct?
yeah, it's
So when I read A24, no, it doesn't make sense to me.
completely.
Yeah, well, I just made it up. Okay. All right, I got it.
People in the room, you know.
You have to make up something like really crazy, like fairy cottages, you know. Yeah.
Any other questions or thoughts? Yeah,
We're talking about maybe changing some food structure, upgrading current structure or houses.
yeah. So if we implement an ADU ordinance, which we've done, somebody on their own property can put an ADU down. That's really not gonna have a gentrification effect. It's on their own property. So we can think of that in the green category. By the way, gentrification is the displacement of economically marginalized people because of the effect of development, infrastructure improvement, the things that cause the value of properties to go up. That naturally causes people to get pushed out as those rents and mortgages increase. We know that we need to build housing. But we also know that we don't want to do it at the expense of people who are most harmed. So let's think about a more impactful strategy. What if we were to tear down a single family home? What if it was built in 1950 and an older woman's been living there her entire life? Right? So maybe her son wants to sell that home and tear it down and turn it into a fourplex. That's certainly possible. But where is mom gonna go? That is a displacement effect. We saw that happen overnight with the closing of the Kiltus house and then if we're legalizing tiny homes, where might that go? What kind of impact would that have? Would that displace people? No. Anybody argue with that? No answer's wrong here. Okay, Dave, you agree?
I'm not sure. I guess it depends on where we're putting this time.
Yeah.
Boy, that's a great point. Thank you. Dave nailed it. So where? Let's say anything's on wheels. Where? You know, we have a developer that approached us, the development committee actually listened to a very creative idea, didn't we, John?
Yep.
And that was for some folks coming from Idaho, looking at a tiny home on wheels community in Bay City. It's pretty exciting, I think. So what I would want you to do, I'm gonna go ahead and use a new example. We're gonna say those, that's the acronym for tiny homes on wheels. You could even also, if you want to write A24, I would recommend you do that so that we know what strategy you're targeting. And then say, Bay City. And what we want is to crowdsource this input so that everybody is coming up with different strategies. Somebody might put A24 on a different page. Somebody might personally feel in this room that a certain strategy is a moderate impact and somebody else thought it was a low impact. That's okay. This is how we're going to really understand from your perspectives within your communities, what you feel are the best strategies, what you feel might be the challenges associated with that with regard to this placement. Does that make sense? Go ahead.
I just had a question about revitalization of downtown second floor, like Lisa Griner is doing, but there's another one underway right now, and then the potential for another one with the other portion of that block that Lisa's project is on. Where those are currently completely, I don't know, I guess I'm curious, how does that revitalization effort, if it is for market rate apartments, when you have other types of apartments like above the rendezvous, that building is, what effect or impact would that be? But there's currently no good utilization of the ones that aren't being renovated.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, and I'd love to hear feedback on this. My personal view is that we have a 1% vacancy rate, so any unit on the ground is going to increase the supply and thereby at least incrementally decrease the cost. That's how supply and demand works. That's how market economics works. Other people might say, yes, true, in the long term. If we put market rate units in a neighborhood where people typically spend significantly less money than that, and it's a brand new, beautiful building, and they do some sidewalk improvements, and they do some street improvements, and things look really nice, is that going to cause some of those property values to increase? And is that going to allow some of those rents to? Strategy. Somebody else might say, you know what, got a thought about, I'm gonna put it in one of these other categories. Again, that's okay. Other thoughts or questions?
I'm curious, for instance, ADU, and I find all the ADU things and I feel green about that. Can I just use one Post-it note, just all of the A22, all the numbers all in one, or are you wanting to see it done differently?
No, and I think that's super effective because it's categorically, it's categorized. And so I think that's fine. If you were to like take a bunch of different strategies that are unrelated and do that, I'd say, please don't. But I like your strategy. That's effective. Other thoughts and questions before we kick off here? All right, folks.
All right, well, it's 9:15. Thank you for your patience this morning. We're gonna go ahead and kick off our housing commission meeting today, May 4th. And welcome you to the beginning of our meeting here, and I'm just gonna ask for us to go around the table, and then we'll introduce the housing commissioners online, and then we'll ask anybody in the public in the room and also online if they'd like to introduce themselves. So I'll start. I'm Carrie Fleischer, recently appointed vice chair of this commission, and welcome. Go ahead.
John May, member at large.
Megan Carpenter, City of Tillamook representative.
Dave Bennett, South County rep.
Sarah Absher, Community Development Director.
Mark D'Onofrio, I'm a guest and associate professor of architecture at University of Oregon.
Thomas Fiorelli, Tillamook County Housing Coordinator.
Michelle Yanko, large employer representative, so I forgot who I was.
Chris Lockenmeyer, I'm also a large employer representative.
Ms. Carlson Swanson and nonprofit representative.
Erin Scar, Tillamook County Commissioner, I'm liaison to this group.
All right, let's proceed online. We have
Ed
two.
Ga- Ed Gallagher, camera not working, but I'm here. Thank you.
Welcome, Ed.
Kristen Koptiuk, member at large based in Rockaway.
All right, great. Is there anybody else online that would like to introduce themselves?
Maria Carrillo with EDC.
Trevor Belts with the Creamery.
All right, and we have some guests in the room. If you guys like to introduce yourselves.
I'm,
Do we just grab?
I'm Gail Uzzell and
Thank you.
Got to see that one is that, you know, get the keys to their apartments. Well, very interested as a community member.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Okay.
And then I heard Briar is online as well.
Yeah, I was fine, but Briar Smith, Tillamook County Habitat for Humanity.
Welcome.
Thanks for the catch.
Not a problem. All right, the next thing on our agenda is a mission minute. Is there anybody that has something for this morning?
Share one thing. I don't know if people are aware, but because the hospital gets so many requests and we have so many needs for people, traveling nurses and locum providers. Judy Doer, one of the administrative assistants, has been keeping a database of rentals because we get approached by property managers about rentals when they come available and they want to know if they, you know, if we have any needs. So I feel like there's a few of those out there and it'd be kind of cool to assemble those into something a little bit more formal and structured and be able to use that for the workforce housing needs. So it's just a thought that and a resource that we may have at our disposal at some point.
That'd be great. All right, well, I think we're just gonna jump right in to Mark's presentation about Mass Timber Design Studios.
Good. Let's see if I can get this to work. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for the invitation to be here.
Just a little bit too TJ, just a little bit higher for the function.
See that. Okay, great. Of course, in true academic fashion, I have way too much information for the time allotted, but I will try to go through it quickly and get to why what's relevant, I think, to what you folks do out here and how might be able to work with you and help kind of imagine some of the questions that you're thinking about that even you were discussing just a few minutes ago. So again, first, I want to start with talking a little bit about who I am. My background is in architecture and engineering. I've practiced, I'm from the Midwest originally, and I practiced quite a bit in the Chicago area before coming out here to University of Oregon to accept a teaching position in the Department of Architecture. I've been out here now about a dozen years. And in that time, as this place is quite amazing, my work and my teaching and my research have all kind of converged into what I kind of call place-based design research architecture studios. And I just wanted to share a few examples of this work from kind of more my neck of the woods around the university, but also try to bring it back home to this place and see what I think is relevant to where you are right now. So in 2015, the city of Springfield, the mayor of Springfield, approached Judith Shine, who I think spoke with you a few months ago about mass timber opportunities and mass timber in general, to lead a design research studio as part of a Glenwood development plan, which is in an unincorporated area between Springfield and Eugene, that was looked at developing a mass timber parking garage. And you don't put those two things together very often. And actually, we found that it was quite difficult to find any examples of that even existing. We found one example in Europe, but it was a really rare idea. But it was the thought being that the city was going to fund this parking garage and that they wanted it to be a showcase of wood products, advanced wood engineering products, as well as sort of a key development linchpin for that whole area. So the beauty of living in the world of academia and students is that we're freed up a little bit from the constraints that bind most professionals. So we were able to deploy with the sponsorship of the city, sort of a series of teams of students that were focused on bringing together the realities of and constraints of parking, working with actual consultants who have been hired by the city, as well as bringing in other outside consultants and connecting to This Is Us down in Riddle, Oregon, standing on what was the first certified CLT panel off their press. They had just received certification when we went down and visited, and so we're physically load testing it, as you see. It was very exciting for the students to think about this new product and think about this very kind of well-tested typology and how we can bring these two things together. And students worked in teams ranging from 3 to 4 individuals, working alongside with consultants and getting a lot of information and feedback from the community throughout the entire process. And of course, bringing their passions and their interests related to environmental concerns and good design to what seems like a pretty mundane building typology. Here you can kind of see that what might be an otherwise dreary space is kind of enlivened by the wood opportunities of mass timber, glulam columns and beams, as well as CLT panels that were incorporated in this. What we found was really exciting was after the studio had completed, we published, self-published a book, as well as disseminated the information through a series of peer-reviewed journals. But I think what was most exciting was seeing actual professionals, in this case, SRG partnership out of Portland and Seattle, incorporating a lot of the ideas that the students developed during this process into their own solution when they were hired by the city of Springfield. So they were involved in the studio and reviews along the way. And you can see that some of the ideas almost very directly in a way were incorporated from the students' ideas about sort of photovoltaic roof panels, as well as an exterior walkway to make it easy to move around the space. This collaboration with Professor Shine continued into looking at a place not very close to home at all, but the Lower East Side of Manhattan. But again, pushing the potentials of mass timber in mixed-use development. So in this case, housing, museum, and a market, all on this very dense urban site. And in this case, students working in teams of 4 were able to explore a lot of opportunities and options of this, kind of untested material at this time. And in this case, placed second in this design competition, really trying to blend together all of the different housing typologies as well as construction methodologies into this one solution. This work, I'm going to go through this a little quickly, and I apologize for that, but I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. This work also led into then the Lane County, the county that our university is located in, reaching out and wanting to sponsor a studio as they were interested in developing ideas for mass timber courthouse, new courthouse to be located on the former city hall site that has been demoed and has still been sitting vacant, unfortunately. But they were interested in what was the potential and feasibility of this. So of course, this was a typology totally unfamiliar to me. So we bring in experts that come, thank you to the county for sponsorship with this. We're able to bring in experts who can get us up to speed about the realities of court design, as well as with the technology of mass timber. And then you feed that to this passion and enthusiasm of the students to be able to explore quite a bit of design ideas and really determine whether this is a feasible possibility with the complexities of the programmatic constraints of, in this case, a courthouse. And what ended up happening was developing a series of 5 solutions that, unfortunately, with the pandemic, is still on hold of waiting for going after some bond, going after a bond to help fund it. But the idea being that we were able to show the county, in this case, the potentials of this and the realities of what opportunities and obstacles exist as part of this process. I'm going to go through this bit a little bit more quickly, but as I've stepped back and kind of been thinking a little bit more fundamentally about architecture as a process, really it is about designing spatial and temporal pulses of energy. And a building is not really just an object, but it's, as we know, in the homes we live in and the places we go and visit, there are these things that are always in constant flux. And we need to think about the design process as being in that kind of constant flux. And that led me to kind of our more recent focus, which is this notion of what I call building ecology, which thinks about a building beyond just an object of a shelter, but all of the impact that it has in the setting of activities that it facilitates, as well as the way that that building feeds back into its location and its site. And that really these things are a series of kind kind of mixes of materials, energy, and information in a variety of ways, and again, the impact that this has on our daily life. And so this has caused me to think about that fundamental theory of architecture and how to prepare students to kind of navigate and design and harness this sort of energy that's capable, and how to then implement that into practice. So more recently, in the last few years, I've been working closely with Michelle here at the Port to examine specifically this place, but first was trying to get students familiar with this idea of thinking about a building beyond just an object, which again, it's something that's ingrained a bit into the culture of architecture, as we kind of fetishize buildings as objects, but really we need to better understand them as part of a much more complex system, and again, the nuances of a lot of the things that you're here to talk about. So part of this first seminar class that I teach is related to expanding that scope of what a building is beyond just an object, but really understanding how it impacts the people and facilitates the activities that exist in that place, as well as how that building feeds back and reinforces the site as either from a ecological or an economic standpoint as well. And so this is done through a case study. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, but in this case, the student had spent some time in Louisiana as a summer internship and was interested in the timber industry there and wanted to look at how a mill operated and really understand a building within a mill. So we kind of referenced some historical information, and this individual was, in architecture, we make models, and everything we do, we make models. And so what I asked the students to do is think about the building as a model in a physical way, right? And how we would manifest that into a built thing. So in this case, he's looking at the planar mill of this particular development, but then also to model the building in a very different way, right? And this is now applying some systems ecology methodologies to really understanding the complexities of what a building is, even a very simple building in this case. And that allows us to then really understand the building from a much more meaningful material impact. So you can think of this as somewhat of a life cycle assessment. It's a bit more nuanced than that, but you can think of it somewhat as that way. And then this allows us to, again, not just think only about the object of the building, but how that planar mill fits into the larger process of the entire mill at large, right? And this entire process of logs coming in, the processing of those logs into finished boards that then go out into market and again, make buildings. It just as this is a process for transformation of a log into a product, buildings and the building process continues that onto another scale. So students, again, are challenging themselves to think about these buildings in a bit broader way. And then we always need to, as we zoom in, we also need to zoom out and consider the impacts these buildings have on their larger sites. So in this case, the student was looking at understanding the nuance of the forest, and then that pulse of time of an understanding before the mill was here, how forested this area was once the mill had come and at the height of its operations. And then once the mill had closed and gone, how again, the forest has kind of reestablished itself and actually is going through another cycle now with development. The Southeast is blowing up in terms of its harvesting of its wood fiber right now as we speak. So here's just some diagrams that show, again, that thought process. Now, that's all really interesting from the academic standpoint, but really what matters is how do we apply that? How do we apply that thinking when we really think to buildings? And in this case, the place-based design research was here at the Port of Tillamook Bay. I took a trip out here about 6-7 years ago and became obsessed with, as my thinking was kind of formulated around this time, and became obsessed with the potentials of this former Naval Air Station, what it evolved into, and felt the need to sort of explore some of these things through these design studios, which really are a laboratory for architects in our thinking. And if there ever has been a place that represents a pulse of material and flow and activity, the port itself is very much that. So it very much is spatial and temporal pulses of energy, and literally its formation was that as well, right? And these are some of the things that fascinate me, particularly when you think about the fact that these two here at Tillamook were only 2 of 17 that were built around the world in a very short period of time. And it just shows you what human ingenuity and creative thinking can do when it's challenged and it's called upon to do so. And I think, I think we're facing those similar challenges in different ways with housing crisis and climate crisis and all of these things. And it forces us to, I think, step up to the same level of creative thinking. The irony is that those buildings were purpose-built and ready-built for a very specific function of housing these blimps, and they only did that for a very short period of time, right? And of course, they lived on and were actually part of the timber industry for a much longer time than they were ever housing the blimp hangers, which they were specifically built for. And so again, this ties in very much so to my interest of the connection to the forest, to mass timber and building, harnessing the potential of the forest as part of this larger process. As we always like to do is connect to the place. Michelle is always wonderful for hosting us here, even in the height of the pandemic here. We were able to come out and visit. I think students understanding the place, seeing the place, really getting a feel for and connecting to people in the place is a critical part of the design process. Here we see Commissioner Scar was willing to join in for some of the discussion and talk about some of the pressures on the port and also his issues larger in the county as well. Which again, the beauty of looking at the port was it was situated within the larger boundaries of the county, and we were able to ask questions and think about the potentials of the place in a much broader scale. So we always sort of look again at time and understand how we've gotten to the point we are at this particular state, because we're only ever looking at it at any given moment in time. And this, again, a lot of this time in the initial was an analysis of understanding the realities of the place, the potentials of the place, obviously from an outside perspective, but trying to be as sort of respectful and understanding of the opportunities that we see here. So obviously, I don't need to tell you all the potentials of this place and the realities of this place, but this was a great exercise for the students to kind of really dig into and understand how the port is situated within the larger county and it's the connection to all the different industries that have historically been here and continue to evolve and change throughout time. And for me, this place is just the beautiful, this is a very simplistic diagram, but it shows the relationship between the bay and the forest and this sort of beautiful fertile valley that sort of is nestled between as a result of this cycle that sort of always is cycling again, material and energy and information through this entire system. So students then dive into a particular industry that they want to think about and develop. And this particular student, who again was still very interested in the potentials of the forest, was looking at how the division of sort of state and private forest lands and the impact that has on the ecology of the place. Again, and the potentials of the fiber that exist in this region and that have been a sort of key part of this region for quite some time. And what, again, going back to the history of the Tillamook burn and understanding that, how much acreage was lost and how, in the last handful of years, a lot of that regrowth has sort of come to maturity and has been a key source of get fiber in this area, continuing to be utilized and carry on a rich tradition of timber in this area. And we again zoom out and think about how that timber then just gets dispersed into a larger region. And then again, how do we tie in these processes to other things that are going on in this area, which is sometimes seen as waste products that can be then incorporated into other aspects of other industries that are going on here. In this case, the student was looking at the potentials of biochar, which is processing woody debris that can then be incorporated into agricultural benefits. So his whole project was, again, built around this notion that we can't think about one part of that system. We always have to be thinking about how all of these things are interrelated and connected. And so he had hoped to think about the development at the port here by building off the power of the potential of the digester and incorporating some of the forest waste into that waste stream, thinking about engineered wood products, building off of the Mills Stimson, in this case, as the potentials of those products beyond just 2x6s being aggregated up into panels or other materials that could be then incorporated into building products in the area. So students develop an entire master plan as well as then individual building refinement and development. So we're modeling things again in a very physical, three-dimensional way, but we're also modeling them through this sort of systems approach because it allows us to compare apples to apples around at various scales. We're always thinking about the building at these three different scales of shelter, of providing protection from the climate, as setting for activity to foster life, and then as again, the site and how this thing impacts into the larger place where it's situated. And so here you can kind of get a sense of how this individual student was thinking about, again, development of the digester as part of this forest management approach, refinement of engineering wood products and further development of this, and in particular interested in a timber innovation center that would again marry this sort of acknowledgement of needing to connect more with what's happening in the forest with then what we use those products that come out of the forest. And so here in this case, it was trying to blend together some of those things into digital fabrication, as well as very much connecting people to some of the trees and wooded areas here that exist kind of around the site. Part of his plan was to reforest certain areas of the port here, which may or may not be feasible. But again, these are the beauty of student thinking as we can kind of push the boundaries of what's possible. And here you can kind of see again the wood products highlighted in the way the design was. So what? Wait, why am I here? Well, I'm here partly because I think there's a lot of really interesting potential with discussions you guys are all doing around housing needs in this area. I think there's a lot of really good opportunities with harnessing the potentials of engineered wood products in this area as well. And so what I see is my next step is again, Tillamook County Mass Timber Housing Architecture Studio. And this is what TJ reached out to me a few months ago as I was in the beginning, early phases of planning for what my next studio year would look like. And I happened to be looking at some different sites, and he's proposed looking back out here. And since I've spent the last 5 years looking out here, and I think this is the closest place to heaven on earth that I've found, I was happy to come out and spend a bit more time out here. So the plan for the next year is to continue this sort of cycle with a little bit more focus specifically on the place and the typology in the building ecology course focused on things relevant here to Tillamook. And then focusing on, in this 2-term studio sequence, on what I'm calling building community, which is trying to find ways to link the synergies between the needs that exist here and the resources that are, I think, readily available to accommodate those needs. So the big points, and this is again at its very early stages of development. So part of why I'm here is to kind of tell you what I'm thinking about, and also to hear some feedback from you all about, hopefully as part of this conversation and helping to move this forward. And what we really want to do in the next year is to really examine and test a variety of potential buildable land sites across the county through this possibility of different housing and applying mass timber as an opportunity. I think it's important, based on studies that you all have been doing, that we imagine and explore a range of housing typologies. And I know that this is part of the discussion that TJ has outlined a little bit for today, even that, what is needed in the area, and, the so-called missing middle housing types. And I think for me, it's always important that the students understand that the work they do has impact, as well as when they're on their way out the door and they're going to be doing this for real very soon, and understanding how to be able to connect with individuals that are really dealing with issues that are relevant to what they're trying to achieve. So I think it's important that we try to align the efforts with the goals and objectives of you all, and try to assist in any community outreach efforts that we possibly can. And again, for me, carrying off this work that I've been doing here at the port is considering any economic development synergies that might exist with mass timber and advanced manufacturing industries around the region. And as part of this, going through this exercise, the hope is that it starts to help identify obstacles and opportunities for future housing development across Tillamook County. Now, I am not an expert in housing. I've a lot of my professional practice has spent in housing, but luckily I'm married to an expert in housing. And so I'm partnering with my wife's firm, which we maybe questionably decided that it would be a good thing to do because she is an expert. And so she's going to be helping out with the studio. She's a principal at BDA Architecture and Planning in Eugene. They have great experience in a variety of affordable housing types, from tiny houses all the way up to 3, 4, 5-story multi-unit buildings. So they bring a level of expertise to the building typology, but they lack the sort of mass timber knowledge and expertise, but they're very interested in how to blend that. So our early discussions were trying to come up with ways that we could think about implementing these technologies into their project types that they already are well versed at. And so the studio becomes, again, another vehicle for us to sort of further refine and explore these options. And of course, building off of the great work that you all are doing here, understanding, you know, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to build off the knowledge that's already in the place. And so understanding what your needs analysis is and how we can help you all to identify some opportunities to get to where you need to be to fill this need. So this is, again, just very much in its early stages of ideation. And so I would encourage you to please reach out to me and with any questions or comments you might have, if you want to kind of participate. And again, I went through that hopefully quick enough, but I'd be happy to answer any questions, or if it's easier, please feel free to connect with me via email. And we love to work out here, and we love to kind of, again, help you all imagine the potentials of the place. So thank you. Yes.
So I'm relatively new on the commission, so I've got a lot to learn. And I may say some things that are incorrect, but my understanding is that our charge is to get housing in Tillamook County as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
This month versus next month, for example. And as I see it, one of our biggest obstacles is cost per square foot. And that is such a huge challenge that it makes it almost impossible, particularly with our lower income projects, to make anything feasible economically. So I'd love to hear what you have to say and your wife has to say with regard to how can we find some less expensive ways to create housing. And in particular, I keep hearing about mass timber, but I don't understand how mass timber might fit into the affordability of new construction, for example.
No,
If it's going to be more expensive than current technology, I don't see a particular purpose in focusing on it, except that it does help us find ways to use some of this timber surplus material.
Yeah.
But in terms of getting housing going now, I don't care what technology it is, but what's the most effective and the least cost housing? So if you're going to design a studio here in Tillamook, I'd love to see not necessarily focus on mass timber,
right,
but instead of technologies that are going to be less expensive and more expedient.
Yeah. No, and I think that's a very good point. I appreciate your comment, is that I kind of put the emphasis on mass timber partly because there is a lot of momentum and enthusiasm across the state and in the region for that. But I wholeheartedly agree that, you know, it's not the only answer, and oftentimes it can, especially at first look, can be a cost prohibitive option. I think that part of what we're hoping to help you all understand and figure out are looking at part of the reason why it doesn't pencil out all the way is very easily early on, is that because it is so new, right? There's a fear factor associated with it. People don't know how to quite price it and bid it. And so there is that fear of the unknown, which I'm going to inflate my cost because there's a lot of unknowns that might happen, right? Plus, there's a lot of fluctuation with raw material costs that have impacts further down the line, particularly as you talk about advanced processes. So I don't want, that is the sort of kind of catchy buzzword of it. The intention of the studio is to look at a lot of different ways of housing. So we're looking at housing typologies in general, And then we're trying to kind of blend into it the potentials of mass timber. It might be that you're absolutely right, that mass timber isn't at this stage the best solution for your needs. But are there ways, especially if we look at resiliency, durability of construction, if we're thinking longer term against, I know there's the immediate need that needs to be met, but if we look at the ability of these buildings to last, much longer than typical light wood frame construction sometimes does, especially if you're looking at publicly funded or tax credit funded projects where there might be some expectations of durability and longevity of the projects. Mass timber starts to become a wood option that competes with other materials that, again, has benefits, local benefits in terms of, again, trying to look for economic synergies that exist beyond just meeting that need of the housing, right? Because again, there's needs of the housing locally, but again, you export a lot of raw material elsewhere that goes off and builds buildings and does these things that are unfortunately not maybe happening as frequently in your own backyard, right? And so this happens a lot in rural areas where a lot of that wealth ends up going off elsewhere and helping others, but doesn't have the immediate benefit to you. I'll defer to if she's still on. She had to leave at 10 for meeting, but I might.
I was gonna say,
defer.
I am here actually, if you don't mind. I raised my hand earlier. I thought the comment was excellent. And one of the things, we're seeing just an absolute surge in cost per square foot right now. Construction is ridiculously expensive. And one of the reasons there's two reasons I've been really interested in mass timber in housing. And I also want to take the opportunity to back up and say, not only might it not be right, but it doesn't have to be all in. There are lots of different levels that things can be looked at to incorporate wood products into housing. Like maybe it is truly just beams in the scale of your work, or it's just floor panels. So kind of looking at a little bit versus all in. But so that's one thing I'm really interested in and I think could be beneficial to you all. But the other piece is where I really see this helping with construction costs is that you can get out of that framing phase faster. And particularly if you have any scale of work that has prevailing wages, whether they're Davis Bacon or Boley, that comes into play when your actual housing authority is doing work, or the scale of your project. If you ended up looking at a mid-rise, when you fabricate off-site and you reduce those on-site labor costs, it can save the project money and it can save on your schedule. And so I think the opportunity of mass timber is that we could potentially build faster. But like Mark said, what we're running up against is that there are not a lot of people that are doing it just yet. And so we're not seeing that upfront cost savings because there's a lot of concern about the unknowns. And so part of this exploration is to do it in a safe environment where we can start to answer those questions. And the answer might not be what we expect, right? It might be that it might be that it's not right, but we have at least a safe space where you haven't entered into a different contractual agreement to commit to something, right? We've got academia as a first way of thinking about problems and on multiple sites and at multiple scales. And so I'll defer back to you, Mark, if you've got other things to add.
That was great. I was going to get to the labor costs, so thank you.
I have a question. That parking garage example that you use in Eugene or Springfield,
Mhm.
Is that actually built?
It is not built yet. It's still on hold as well, partly because
Okay.
there's a hotel and conference center that's part of the development. It's this beautiful riverfront area that's in this sort of post-industrial land between Springfield and Eugene, and that's sort of in a holding pattern right now. There's some other kind of preparatory development that is going on in anticipation of that. But the SRG partnership has taken it pretty far into some design. They did the work that we had done in the studio actually led to some other studies in the university into durability of the material as it's exposed to wind-driven rain and things like that. So it's kind of the pandemic put a lot of things on hold, unfortunately, and those two projects that were moving right along were victims of that. So, yeah. Yes.
I have a really specific and probably to some people strange question to ask you. I totally agree about the energy. You know, everything is energy and wood is for human health, and that's part of my job. I work for a hospital. So wood is a natural product, and it's healthier for us than a lot of synthetic products are to be exposed to. I'm curious about the glue from the laminate,
Yeah.
if that has off-gassing that's actually not healthy for us. So-
There has been amazing advancements in bio-based adhesives. A lot, OSU has been doing amazing work in that area. And so there are much healthier versions of adhesives that are part of that. It's a great question. Biophilia of being surrounded by wood, but if
Right,
you're
but if
poisoning yourself, yeah, if you're negating that with adhesives, right? So there are formaldehyde-free adhesives that are being used in that process. Yeah.
Thank you. I saw some.
Yes.
I'll let you hold my question for the person online and I'll go ahead.
Tom. It was Tom.
Is there a question online?
Been muted.
Go ahead and say.
Go ahead.
Okay. So just to test for my own understanding, I'm understanding this to be a mutually beneficial relationship where you and your group have, a case study and relationships already built. You can be working in this community and know and grow your knowledge of the area and also build on some of the research and work that we have done.
Yeah.
And so then, we're going to benefit eventually. I'm understanding you may come back with your learnings and understandings.
Yeah.
So that we can be kind of increasing the pace of the work
That's right.
together. Do you foresee any type of project being proposed at any point, or is this completely academic?
It's a really great question. So part of what working with TJ is identifying some potential buildable sites in the area. We would like to have a variety of sites so that makes it interesting for the students and also useful for you all. And I think we start out with this idea that it is a bit of fanciful play, but from that fanciful play, sometimes just seeing things can spark ideas in people's minds, right? And so that again is doing it in the safety of an academic environment, but with real issues and real potentials of the place, allows for that dialogue, that back and forth, right? So again, we are not proposing end all be all solutions, but again, we want to approach it from, in a way, a specifically generic approach, right? So that things that we look at and that we come up with are lessons learned about what we can think about moving forward and even cycling through to the next year around, but are also might be seeds that get planted in somebody's mind that says, oh, that's a great idea. I didn't think about that. Or that could work even at the site that I have available that's similar, right? It's not the exact site. So that's the beauty of, I think, this relationship is even if these things don't come to fruition in the places we look at, they can at least start to lay the groundwork for opportunities elsewhere, as well as fit into some of the needs and realities and discussions that you all maybe have at a community scale. So that is the hope, is that there is this reciprocity and this ability for this to feed into other opportunities moving forward.
Yeah, I've been was a general contractor here since 1982, and I built numerous custom, I did a subdivision and commercial structures. And the biggest question, like I've mentioned before, to me is the significance of our wind shear and all the things. But I've built buildings with metal members that are huge, that just for the wind load that they're going to face.
Absolutely.
And addressing that on these mass timbers, is that same kind of hold down theories or what?
Similar hold down theories, yes, absolutely. And again, I think it puts it into a scale of reinforced concrete and steel in terms of a strength to weight ratio. It actually it exceeds some of those materials because of how light it is and the impact that it has on foundations, which can be an issue out here, as well with your soils. Absolutely. Again, that's why you're seeing mass timber happening in Portland and in Seattle and these urban developments, because they're able to take these products and go taller with them and meet sort of a higher density demand. But I would argue again that the environmental forces that are at play out here are another reason why it's a possibility as a material, because it allows you to develop a much more robust and resilient system that will last to extreme events that are inevitable and only seem to be happening more frequently day to day, right? So I think, yes, that is another sort of rationale why mass timber is starting to take off, as well as unknown sort of things that we don't really fully understand the full potentials of when we know we know light frame construction pretty well, and we've always, there's a problem, we add another layer. But if you go back in the history of building, even in the history of this place, there were buildings that were built just out of wood, massive amounts of wood, right?
Balloon framed, clear 2 stories tall.
Yeah, and
they're still here.
That in itself can be substantial, right? So I think when you start talking about wood on a scale beyond just light wood frame, there's a lot of unknowns even in terms of how those perform. And I think that is another reason to kind of go through these exercises, is to start to imagine how might that allow you to have wood exposed in environments that allow for sort of perhaps a nicer place to live without adding layers and layers of plastic and all these other things that are potentially having harmful benefits or harmful impacts on the environment as well. Right. And so I think it's about sometimes thinking about it as simpler construction, but that can be more durable and resilient in the long run.
And I can see where it's a hard sell to contractors, because I lived through the era when everything was made out of timber. Beams were just solid wood. And then they came in with paralams and blue lams and micro lams, and all this stuff started replacing the mass wood we put in. And that was a hard change, because you did what was proven and your name was on it. So you didn't want to vary and have something go wrong. But during that process, I've noticed that those type of structures eliminated all the expansion and contraction of the solid lumbers. You didn't have cracking.
Right.
You didn't have the dry out period where everything, started doing its thing. And they've proven. So I'm very interested in this stuff, but I do believe it's going to be a hard push.
Absolutely.
I'm just curious if there are examples of ADUs being constructed out of that material. Back to the earlier discussion around the expediency of that, even if the cost is higher initially, the durability for the landowner that uses it, they're gonna get more bang for the buck for the long term.
There are,
perhaps.
and I can forward along through
Okay.
TJ to the commission some examples that I'm at least aware of. You see it a little bit more in some urban areas where, again, some of these ADU requirements have been in place a little bit longer, and so there's been a little bit more development of designing of some of these systems. And again, I think, and again, I think even when Professor Shine was presenting to you a few months ago, right, they had kind of developed a sort of modular system that was a one size fits all, right? And I think it's a really valid way to go. But again, as Amanda had alluded to, it's not that it has to be one size fits all, right? It can be looking at hybrid systems where there can be some light wood frame for walls, perhaps because you're varying systems in there, and then just using sealed panelized elements for floor plates or roof plates or things like that, right? Which allows you to have sort of lower building heights and less exposed walls, and which have, again, environmental and economic and energy performance criteria as well. So part of it is looking at, and again, working with contractors when there's stuff that happens on site, and then there's things that need to happen on site, which inevitably happen, and you could take something from the factory and put it onto a site that's not perfect. The mass timber allows for a little bit more flexibility of changing things on the fly as well. So I'd be happy to share some examples of what I know of systems that incorporate some of those things. Yes.
Does anybody use this on a cottage cluster, like creating homes and have a set of plans that they can choose from? I mean, has anybody?
No, and that's where it's starting to get like, not I mean, I'm sure there's some examples out there that have done that. I'm not familiar with a lot of them, but I think again, that's a part of what we want to explore a little bit, or what are some of the needs from a housing typology standpoint? Again, these may be smaller kind of multifamily cluster type environments. And how do you marry that with some of these systems that might make that construction from a cost, from time standpoint, from a labor standpoint, more feasible, even if the material cost is a little bit more upfront, if you're saving on cost of labor and construction time, and also time that you're sitting on a site that's not being utilized, there could start to be some balance and wash. And again, I want to say that the studio wants to take consideration and look at cost issues, right? Because we know the beauty of school is we don't have to think about those things. But I think as much as I try to make the students aware of that, those are often the things that drive all decisions, right? It's the almighty dollar. So we want to be realistic about the things that you can come up with any fanciful idea, but if we start to see how we can actually make them work at the scale of how much density we can get on a site because we're doing more kind of cottage cluster system, then I think that's again another way to explore the potentials of this material and these typologies that are again I think are challenging our way of what we expect a house and home to be, right? The American dream is your single family home, and I think you see that that's especially even younger generation, that's not as much of a necessary thing, and they're okay living in a little bit more density, and because community starts to get formed when you actually have those sort of close ties with neighbors. So
Well, thank you very much for coming.
absolutely.
And I think we'll encourage, look forward to some future conversations.
Great.
And
Thank you so much. Hopefully I didn't chew up too much.
no, I think
Perfect.
we're close on time,
Awesome.
so. I think we're gonna go ahead and move on to Senate Bill 406 update. Aaron and Sarah.
So I will just share that I don't remember where it was a month ago. So where it is now is it has been passed out of the Senate to the House, and it is sitting in the House Housing Committee. We had a public hearing which we were able to go and testify, and that's where it sits currently. So I did reach out to Senator Weber's staff and just said, so what's next? And he said, next it needs to be voted on by the committee. And I asked if there was a timeline. He said, not yet. So I think it's sitting. And of course, the legislature is currently doing some machinations over there. And we hope that they will finish that so they can get back to finishing the actual work of some of the bills that are not in nature and so forth. So Sarah has also been traveling around and visiting with additional city councils. And so Sarah, I'll let you give an update on that.
All right, yes, thank you, Commissioner. So one of the things that I have been doing is visiting with all of our city councilors, city managers, and city planners to talk about how 406 could be implemented, what that would look like, answer their questions, get their support. And I am pleased to share that all cities have signed on with full support. I've got 2 more cities to go. I've got one meeting next week and one meeting the week after, but they're all very excited actually about this opportunity. I think there's only been one city that wasn't quite sure, but you know, it was a more of a resource and capacity concern. And because this is very much going to be a collaborative approach between the cities and the county, we'll be able to share resources and do some good work together. So with that, been working with the Public Education and Outreach Subcommittee. And so Kristen or Michelle, I don't know if you want to talk about the letter, but Kristen, I did hand out copies of the draft letter in anticipation that the House will pass and the bill onto the floor, which I think will be the last step. We would love to have a letter from the Tillamook County Housing Commission supporting Senate Bill 406. And just to take a quick step back, Trevor Belts is on, Michelle and a few others who actually through this process, Dave, have submitted letters supporting 406 as well, Carrie. So thank you all so much for doing that. But so here's a letter we would like to prepare and have ready. As Commissioner mentioned, we don't know when the hearing schedules, they usually come within a couple of days of us being noticed about them, notified. So we just want to have this ready to go for that final push. And so if you want to take a minute to read it, I'm happy to put it up to do a share screen for our folks online. And
Sarah, I just
Yeah.
wanted to comment, because we did have a discussion about this at our legislative meeting. About that this might be a good letter, because the public works section the public hearing has already happened. So this might be a good thing that maybe Representative Jabati could submit as to the floor.
yes,
As a letter of support.
Mhm.
So because right now at work sessions, we can't as a group testify, but we can ask these representatives, get this in the hands of our representatives and the people on that committee to put to a letter to the floor, as a letter of support for the entire, body when it goes to the floor for a vote. Because we found that, is best, the kind of the last opportunity in which, this sort of letter can be received. So I just wanted
Yep.
to point that to clarity that it's not, a testimony,
Right.
that it would be a letter to the floor. Hopefully, the reps will
Yes.
take it to that point.
And Trevor does have his hand up as well, Carrie.
Please, Trevor.
Thanks, Carrie. That's spot on. The other thing that I would add that I should have mentioned at our legislative committee last night is that what also would be helpful is if we send that letter directly to Representative Javity and ask him to send it along to Chair Dexter, indicating that we have unanimous support within the county for this, for the communities that would be impacted by this legislation. So that may provide support to her that this isn't contentious, and that would, spur a sooner work session on the bill.
And after everybody has a chance to review it, we are going to be asking for a motion of the commission, if everybody's in support, for a signature on this so that the letter can be in a final draft stage and would be signed. Most likely, I think TJ mentioned the temporary, the chair, would that be?
That would be you.
That I would be the signing on behalf of the commission with a vote of a quorum vote in that aspect, but we definitely would like to make any changes that you may suggest.
Yeah, and you'll notice the highlighted questions at the bottom of page 2. One of the things that we were wondering about, or at least I have been wondering, and Kristen can jump in and clarify, or Sarah can, if I'm not speaking properly, but I thought looked good to have all of the names of the housing commission members listed on that, have it signed by Carrie as interim chair, but then have all of our names and positions listed as well. Just, I think it just adds more weight. And then we weren't sure that we don't really have an official letterhead. So do we want more than just the website, or other contact information? We want to have like TJ's email.
The letterhead that we had created for the outreach committee is on the OneDrive.
Oh, okay.
And so folks are still on the OneDrive.
I
is-
need to get the link.
It's on the outreach committee OneDrive. And so I'll make sure I send that to your direction and then you can use it however you see fit.
Okay.
When we do have the county housing coordinator, the housing email, commission email as well. So if people want more information, we can make sure that's added too.
And I need to re-get that, because we need to put that on those one pagers, and I don't think that we have the right one right now on those.
Yeah, that's correct. And then it still includes our Gmail, which we.
Yeah, okay.
So I think the letter's great. I think you guys are doing great work in the legislative committee, and I would be in support of advocating to Representative Javity to read it on the floor. I think that'd be powerful.
Do you have any suggestions? Is there anything you feel that Kristen and Michelle and I should look at for any edits? Or
No,
we wanted to keep it at 2 pages. Kristen did the heavy lift on the letter.
I agree with Michelle. I think all our names should be on it.
Okay.
Any chance you could get any of those cities to put their name on it?
Some of them have sent their own letters.
Okay, good.
And
Right on.
testified,
on.
actually. So, yeah, but I can circle back around with that too. I'm just not with the time. It's taken
Yes.
several months to get to them.
And so I think we need to just entertain a motion to formalize that and just say that with the, I guess, as amended by the outreach committee. Or
We can wrap it up.
Yeah, and I can put forward a motion that we would submit the letter to Representative Javity with that request to also share that with Representative Dexter, is it? With the addition of these Carrie as the signer and the addition of our housing commissioner names and the on the dated letterhead.
been moved and seconded that we send the letter, and if we can have a vote of for all those that are on the commission that say aye.
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 And well, we can do it afterwards. Is there anybody against? Hearing none. Is there any further discussion, Michelle?
No, I just meant like before we voted, if anybody had any other questions or.
Okay.
I think we're good. Thank you, everyone.
All right, TJ, if you want to lead us back into the activity of the Housing Commission's production strategies, and hopefully we can kind of lead this to about a half hour, or well, you have it on 25 minutes, so see if we can stick to that time.
Yeah, I think we'll be able to get through this fairly well. One thing I also want to mention is that I'll be ceding my coordinator report time today, so that'll be okay. If necessary, I can do that if we need a little more time to work through. What I'm going to go ahead and do is share my screen really quickly. I want to encourage folks online to please pivot to your Miro board. If you haven't been able to access that yet, please go ahead and you can either text me directly on my phone. Let me make sure there's nothing here now. That's a good sign. But if you text me or let me know that you need some support, I would be able to do that. I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, and share my screen and take you through just a quick overview of how this will work. So what we have here is for the online folks, this essentially mirrors what we have here in person. Up in the top left-hand corner is an active link. You can see the little State of Oregon's tree logo in the top right. That is a link directly to the Housing Production Strategies document that you can go ahead and click on and use right here. If you notice, you have on the yellow square, just like we have on the wall, which is proceed with caution, gentrification and displacement are possible. How could we do things differently? In the green square, we have go ahead and continue. There is very unlikely to be any gentrification or displacement. Please go forward. And then, of course, in the red stop category, gentrification and displacement are highly likely. What mitigation measures must we include? Now, we don't necessarily need you to think through what those mitigation measures are today. We really just want you to put it in the correct category. And we could ask you to verbally speak to your concern at our next Housing Commission meeting when we can unpack this and talk about the results of what we got both in person and online. So really quick question specifically for folks online. Any questions about how this works? And then I'll go ahead, actually, let me go through this little presentation and point out where things are. So here's the proceed with caution. Stop, continue. Right here, what we have is just a list of sticky notes. You can just grab one of these and drag it right onto the place where it belongs, double click and type in what you want. And I'll give you an example of that here in just a moment. And again, here's just that 50,000 foot view. Now, I'm gonna go ahead over to our board today. I see Kristen's already on there. Very good. All right. So we're gonna take just one of these, and let's say I wanna go ahead into this category. I can double click it and I can say A24, tiny homes on wheels. That was the example that we used here in person today. And then go ahead and hit enter and maybe say Bay City. That is a safe one because, as we mentioned earlier, the development committee heard from somebody who's actually looking at doing just this. And there it is on that square. Don't worry about crowding out the size of those squares. As long as the sticky note is somewhere near the appropriate category, it's okay. Afterward, I'll go ahead and unpack all of this and make sure it ends up in the right place. So have a free-for-all, have fun. This is an interactive exercise. Any questions from folks online?
Are we gonna do this now?
We are doing this now. We are doing this right now. And so in a few minutes, folks in the room here today are gonna stand up and you'll be able to stretch your legs. We have some, like I said, Sharpie markers over on that table, as well as some sticky notes. And you can take those and put them in the appropriate places. And people online, you can sit there behind your desk and do the same thing. For anyone that wants a little bit of an overview, the mouse is where you can just move this around. You can hit the plus or the minus here, or you can hit control and up and down on your mouse to make it go in and out.
I have a question. So this is only really looking at gentrification impacts with the stoplight system. And I have a few kind of red lights on some of these things, not because of gentrification, but because I think they're just bad ideas. Like when it's like, you know, short-term rental regulations, like we're trying to build trust and we're trying to bring people to the fold. So if we entered into some of those types of strategies, we could erode that trust and we could create more discord than buy-in. So is there an option to put those kinds of things on the red so that they are called out as being things that we feel strongly about, or is that not what we're gonna do?
So this is a positively focused exercise. Right, these are supposed to be strategies that we might use. There are over 100 strategies
Okay.
here. And one of the things that the state makes really clear, right, is that not all of these are gonna work in every community. In fact, these are really developed for folks who are under House Bill 2001, who are over that 10,000 population threshold. So there's probably a subset of strategies that are going to work in a rural community such as ours.
Right.
There's a mismatch there. That's okay. If there's ones that you don't think work, just don't put them on the wall.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that that was the shared understanding. And
Thank you.
I like it. I like positivity.
And we've got, again, housing production strategies document over there. If you want to carry this around the room and pick up those notes and put them up there. Thank you, Carrie. I see you've already got one on the board. I've also got some extra sticky notes too. I want to welcome the audience as well as our guest speaker to contribute to this today.
PJ, is there anything I can do to help you?
You mentioned they need help online or all different comments.
No.
Yeah.
We got it. Yeah.
Hey, all right.
Yeah. And yeah, and you've got it up there. Yeah. It's today, we just started. It was today, yeah, but what can I? So one thing I can, things that we did just.
TJ, are we supposed to be drawing ideas from that housing strategies document or just?
That is correct. Thank you, Kristen. So you see my example there where it says A24 tiny homes on wheels? Yeah, take any one of these strategies. If it's zoning, take a yellow. If it's a regulatory barrier, take that salmon. And if it's purple, take the incentive. And then drop it on the appropriate category and type in the letter and number for that strategy. And also try to include where you think that strategy might be appropriate. So I put Bay City in my example.
Okay.
Sorry to be so dumb.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you actually define it?
Yeah.
And let's say the employer assistant funding or financing.
I haven't gotten
That's
this.
I have no idea how it affects different locations for this question.
So. So it might be positive for gentrification, and that if it's an existing facility, right? Is it right? Think about that. There's quite a few. Well, it could in the context of it can, it does moves and with that money, it can result in certain places.
Look at this, y'all are just preloading your strategy.
There's no harms. I love that. You know, because those loans give people an opportunity to fix things up or rebuild them or build them somewhere where they want to do more, which then can. I use pillow. Well, it's hard because it's like, I'm like, zoning discuss this. Start doing most of this already.
Taking up, like, and that was part of the courses and all from density. So that's a form of gentrification, but it wasn't gentrification that displaced people like previously. Specific restaurants and other ones, all of a sudden you're seeing more better improvements that clean it very so exciting. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would say, I think that it's not just a private, positive impact on the jail. But we have many. Assessment unless it is. Like it's financing and supporting something that comes in that requires other people to move out so it can be where it is. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. So maybe that's what you're. Because I think to see that. Yes, yeah, just, I think it's putting things out there and TJ can help reorganize the more sources and try. So that I said it's a good thing. She's not, unless she makes new connections. She won't be additional SDCs. The only SDCs to be stormwater. And you would say that we use the credit. This house is out there. So. Just short of that. Yes, we know. Because I think that's right. Yes. This is good to see you. Thanks for coming back. But a lot of her SDC things, I was just store, like I said. So, I just keep running back and forth. Every month, right? That's one of those barriers that can be removed to result. Nice. But it can have a positive or negative. Absolutely right. Oh. One of my, which is in the same. Rezoned.
Gotta do the silver.
Right. Place where you go.
I got where they belong.
We've got, what we got? I've got extra sticky notes if folks want them.
TJ, could you possibly remove the screen image so that those of us online can see what's happening in the room?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kristen.
There was a secret.
You can't see anyone. Here we go. There you are.
Thanks.
Yeah, for exercise.
There you go. I'm walking around with my readers on. It also is probably not a good shape. Vice versa.
Yeah. I will. Think that whole listening.
Great, I just recommend that.
First, once we go through and talk through them, I imagine that. I was like, that's all good. I was like.
I know.
She's first. Yeah, join you, okay?
I know. Right.
Better.
Because it's people are focusing on. Stupid things that happen. Yeah. Right.
I'm gonna email just this action to you now, and then later today, when you have time. Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate any input or anything that you have to add to that.
Get your email and I'll respond immediately with that website I mentioned.
Okay. Yeah.
I've been looking at this recently. I'm wondering if that's what I think. In the assessors. Yeah, that's right. That must be, because I'm like, geez, you said it, and I'm like, I don't know if it's familiar. And I'm looking at it. I did.
Structure, and I think it'd be interesting to figure out where other models other than just. They're just there. Interesting to look at.
Yeah. I just, I was like.
Yeah, and whatever you think I should have. I want to make sure.
As well as it. I still understand.
Interesting. Everybody can see my screen, but I didn't make it back.
And so it's like, oh. That's interesting. I said, yeah. I think that's. That was. No.
I didn't choose it, but it was like, we didn't really have that power.
Might have been on the list, but I didn't put that up there either.
No.
I said no, like a constitutional change.
Right, it's
Okay.
a big.
We're gonna wrap up in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's one I've asked AOC's governments rather than to certain that too. So they need to bring them.
Just here.
Yeah, I want to learn.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
You know, it's been an interesting life for Brian.
We've had a couple people that I don't consult close. I mean,
It's 1.7.
now he's getting to be just flat.
Yeah, same issue. The kind of just hands.
Yeah, a lot of.
What a character.
A lot of care down there. Who knows about the hazard.
Right.
And.
I don't know, this is the best of the all. But it's speaking, yeah.
The last couple of years have been log truck repair. One of them, with hands. I would imagine there's some there.
And she
That
said.
talked to that developer that has a property down the road. They tore down the
Either.
Alexander House.
Yeah.
And it's over $60,000.
Or they.
It really asbestos to tear the structure down.
Something else.
And he's not gonna do anything now because the city kind of told him there's a moratorium on building to the sewers.
Yeah.
Stuck with a rock. I'm not sure where it's gonna be done.
We gave them alternative and said we could either hook them at Joe. Or we could pipe it. I just don't even know where all cities hall. Either one's gonna be.
It was having, like, money
But this
down
is
the
what I hope that he's down further comparing these other
Wow.
state system, like. I was just seeing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, back in '02, I did the store out there, Fairfield, built that, and I doing the sewer for
So.
They might sewer system. Like, by the.
Yeah. And so.
Citizens, building.
Yeah, that's exactly, it has them around, you know.
Yeah.
No, like Third Street.
Yeah.
This buildings.
Oh, yeah, that was
Block and a half.
It lets you say that.
And '02, it was $76,000. Oh, I'm sure.
No, that's all strictly. That'd be station saying that's another thing about your your stuff.
Yeah, but just you have to.
That's a multi, but all you have to go get your house over the street there on 12.
Or like fly, you know, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
We're working on it. We're looking at at
Yeah.
least
Well, they've got to deal with stormwater. With the larger issues we have.
I can't believe something's not gonna be on down. To get the pipes to do that water.
Do they have a system to line the old ones now, or is that not? Is that part of what you really tell? Because it's still, if you're over the ground line, that's. Much more comfortable than they want.
Yes, that's.
Oh, yeah.
Normal day, I stay like there and try to read. And they just. Then when it rains, the valves,
Oh, yeah, I did that Fifth Street site. Each week, that 94. And during the 96 flood, so much water coming in the sewer system.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Well, like, and the rest come on. There was.
The kids are out there playing. Exactly.
No, it's.
That seems to be the first hurdle we need to hop is it's where to build these.
Well, I'm trying.
It's a repository. Is it? Okay. So they, yeah, that's good. Is that behind the Methodist church? Yeah. Oh, behind the Head Start. Yeah. So that.
All right.
I agree.
Gonna bring this back.
Now we have a way to do it, which is fun, right? Your meetings are now forever. Part of the public meeting.
TJ, is there anything else that we need to do? You want to take it on to the next step?
Yeah, I'll make a quick comment here. First, thank you everyone for such an engaging activity. If you had trouble getting online, I'll be sending out an email following this meeting so that you'll know you can circle back and make additional comments. Same thing for the folks in the room here. If you wanted to add something online, you can absolutely do that. I'll be taking what's online and putting it on these boards. Similarly, I'll be taking these boards and putting it online. So there'll be 2 places where everybody can see what's happening. I want you all to come to our meeting next month with 2 things. Number 1, a couple of sentences about what you put up here and a couple of sentences about why. And here's the thing I would like to highlight for you all. And here's the challenging question for you. Why don't we have anything in the red category?
Yeah.
Now, we don't have time to talk about that today, but I really want you to think about that. We're gonna have a fun conversation next month. In the interest of time, we'll go ahead and move forward to our updates. Thank you, everyone.
Positive. All right, Erin, Commissioner Scar has to leave for a meeting. So she has given up her time, so we're gonna go ahead and move to, and actually, TJ, were you going to also?
I will as well, and I'd like to leave this room. Miss, I think you and I spoke a little bit about, we wanted to talk about the finance, the funding program coming up. So let's leave a little bit of time, if that's okay, Carrie.
Well, I was thinking this would be the perfect time.
It absolutely
to have
is.
That discussion.
So I'll give up my time, and that should give at least 10 minutes for you to do that.
Okay. So for the funding committee, we are working on putting together a presentation for next month. So what our recommendations would be for the funding process and how we would, score, for lack of a better word, what the applications are, what the application will look like. But in the meantime, we've been talking about the employee housing, pre-development process and how we might, structure that, how we might encourage those relationships and what the benefit could be to, the community as a whole, and then the work that we're doing and really making sure that we have that as a component this time on as well. We have heard what everyone has been saying, both during the process last time and then in subsequent conversations, things that we want to make sure are maybe adjusted a little bit on in the process, made a little more clear, and then just recognizing some places that feel so we're comparing apples to oranges, and in some instances that is. So that when things do come in that we haven't thought about, that's great. That's what we're hoping for, is a lot of variety and creativity in the proposals that come before us. So just wanted to make sure everyone knew what this body of work is that we're doing, what our goals are, and just open it up for any questions or comments.
What's our timeline for the next round? Have that criteria in place.
Go ahead.
So the finance committee is planning to have this application open in September, and we're really front loading a lot of this work right now to make sure that happens. So right now is the opportunity to say, hey, think about this or include this, or on that employee housing topic, here's my thoughts.
Is there some kind of handout that people are responding to?
No, we're in conversational stage right now.
I think to that point, I think having something to look at, and for lack of a better word, throw darts at, is gonna help me the most to be able to respond, you know, and I think it's okay if it's not perfect and it's not totally fleshed out. That's what we're trying to accomplish between now and your September window. So it'd be helpful to get that, whatever you have in draft form to us to look at and ponder on. My suggestion.
And I do encourage folks to reach out to any of us on the finance committee with your questions, your reminders, your comments. Like if you're afraid the thing that you brought up the last time around didn't get noted, or you want to relift it up, please do between now and the end of this, like the third week of this month, so that we have that to consider in our next meeting.
And can you elaborate on the employee assisted, what, or employer assisted, what kind of, yes, what's the goal and what is the finance committee's role in that process that you're trying to do?
So it's really multifaceted. So it's the opportunity of encouraging employers to recognize what assets they might have available, be it cash, land, or both. And then building what they're looking for in a possible or potential partner as a developer. And then coming forward and kind of making a commitment to, we have these assets, we want to use them going toward housing. How do we do that? And so that's the part we're trying to figure out the details, but it's really a commitment. If they already have an existing relationship with a developer, even better. But it might be a matter of there's some matchmaking happening as well. Like we might know some developers that are looking for an employer, but they haven't quite connected yet. Anything to tell us that?
Yeah, a couple of things we threw around. Point wise, a applicant might receive more points if they had a developer in mind. And they were ready to pull the trigger on a project potentially. Maybe still some points if they don't have a developer in mind, but they've got some land and cash to throw in there. So much technical assistance or support. What we're looking at is the opportunity to leverage additional assets and resources within our community to make our fund go further. Remember last year we had $400,000 in ARPA funding. That doesn't exist this year. How do we get the same impact this year that we got last year? We funded 87 units to the tune of about $16,000 per unit, total of about $750,000. We can get that same kind of impact because what we know from our employer survey is that there are employers out there with land, with money, and they are spinning their wheels looking for options for their employees to the end where they're even blanket mortgaging or blanket leasing entire units, whether they're occupied or not. So what we're looking for is a way to create a competitive application where they can come forward, do some matchmaking and leverage those funds, just as Miss was describing. And quickly for the folks who are on our finance committee, raise your hand. If you're on our finance committee, it is Miss. We have Chris, we have Dave, and as well as you can't see her online, but Kristen, a really excellent group of folks. Reach out to any one of them or myself with questions or thoughts following this meeting.
Thank you for that clarification, because that was on the top of my mind. I've seen what programs are out there from a packet from Aaron, so I just wanted to see what how this was going to incorporate.
Last time our grant application asked whether or not they had received other funds. And I think when we went to select recipients, we considered, have they gone out to look for other dollars? Is that still part, I missed the meeting, but is that still part of the application?
Yes, and we also haven't gotten that far. That's part of this month's work, is to really look at some of the things that were qualitative. The quantitative is pretty well in line for the most part, and then qualitative is what we're really.
Because I know that we found out that there's so much more federally that are, or statewide that are available for folks.
Yeah.
And that was news to us, but I can imagine even some people who aren't really plugged in, it would be a barrier to being able to apply and to get, and to be scored higher if they were not aware of that. So I always think we need to be a source of references for people about other opportunities too. I mean, you and I are on the same page about not putting up barriers.
Yeah, so, in actuality, we could keep the question, but then it could trigger a response to say, well, we want to make sure you're aware of other possible
Yeah.
funding sources rather than it be a detriment
Yeah.
in the application.
And I'd like to recommend on this thought here that we could actually get out an outreach article or a news push that says, in the next coming months, we have our fund opening. And by the way, here's some information from the finance committee about places where you could actually go and get funding. So we're giving folks that information as well as enough of a little bit of runtime to actually go out there and find them. Those state and local sources too are ones that you could probably submit within the next couple of months, as long as it's not the really onerous like LIFT application, which already closed by the way. And so I think that strategy helps folks with that concern. Chris, is that right? Cool. Please reach out to Sarah. She is working with the outreach committee, and she can coordinate those efforts. Is that okay, Sarah?
Absolutely.
And I appreciate you looking that up, Chris, because that is, one of our main priorities, I feel, of the committee is to make sure we're identifying and removing as many barriers as we can. Sometimes they just show up and we don't even realize they're unintended. And, so if you notice one of those as well or two, please let us know so we can be working on that.
All right.
Hi guys,
Thank
this is me. I'm just asking. I did try getting a hold of I think Thomas Ferrelli. I emailed him, didn't get a reply back. Called, left several voice messages, visited the office. I was not able to get a hold of him. So how can we find more information about this?
We have our webpage. I apologize if I've missed your emails. It's been an incredibly busy last couple of weeks, including some time off that I had. This is Thomas Fiorelli, by the way.
Oh, hi. Okay. Yeah, hi there. Okay.
Yes, hi there. Please go ahead and if you wouldn't mind, resend your email this morning so it's fresh. I will go ahead and respond to that and I can direct you to where the website is located and where those resources are. Thank you.
Oh, no problem. So can I use the planning page? Because I tried scheduling an appointment. I know you guys are extremely busy. Or do I just email you? I mean, because the community development, like there's no link to schedule an appointment.
We can talk about this offline. Please include that in your email and I'll include our department director. I just want to make clear that we have a housing division, which is very intentionally separated from our planning division, because those are the folks that deal with rules and procedures. Go ahead and email us and we'll make sure we get on the right track. I'm so sorry that we haven't responded to you yet.
No worries. Thank you so much. Thanks.
All right. Michelle, do you have an update on outreach?
Yeah, real quick one. Just that, we've already tackled one of the big things that we've been working on, which is the letters of support for Senate Bill 406. And, it's kind of nice that we're getting to wrap that up so we can put our focus back on some of the other things. We are finalizing those one-page, information sheets on all of our committees and we're getting close. We should be able to have those for,
Do we have all of them? I had that in my notes to ask.
we don't have them ready yet. I haven't seen any of them come back to me yet. So Heidi's working on some with Lynn and, okay, so they're still in progress and part of it was we needed the, for housing outreach, we have like our slides that you created for us of our objectives and our focus areas and what, it's kind of broken down with the like black and white with circle on it.
Well, that's for each committee. All 4 committees are in that same slide deck. And I shared that with Lynn. Lynn said that you all have that.
Okay, I don't know why, but I didn't see that. I only saw it from.
Yeah, I resent it again and you said that's the same one you already had.
Yeah, it's the same one, but so it basically only does outreach is what it seems like.
Yeah, I don't, there's
I mean, in detail beyond just the 4?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what other committees worked on was really, sketching out those specific 4. I think that outreach really went a lot further in sort of saying what those strategies are. This is where committees can absolutely provide some additional context, but what's on those slides is really the areas of focus. That's really the text that we want to include. I think outreach, all that extra stuff probably doesn't need to make its way onto those one pages because it's incredible.
It's just like, what are the top 3 or 4 things that your committee is working on?
That's on that presentation. There's 4 strategies for each committee.
So maybe what we can use our goal, we've been setting goals for ourselves because we've got some good work that we're wanting to pump out is maybe TJ, we can meet with Michelle. Let's make sure, Michelle, you have those. And what we would love to do is come back next month and give you those one pagers to look at as part of our work. So we can get those up and published.
Is this?
It's not the, I only have the one that has like 4 slides for just our committee. This is exactly what I need.
That is uploaded on today's.
Yeah, that's, so there's, it
Okay.
sounds like there's a
Um,
connection there.
So that's what our individual committee members need to use to build the one pager for in their respective, so I think Heidi's working with Lynn and John for code committee, and Kristen, I believe, may be working with finance. And then I believe Heidi might be on legislative also. So ultimately, with this information, we have everything we need to get those put together and get it back to your committees. And so now that we've figured out where that we can get that extra detail, we'll be able to get that moving forward more quickly. And then the last thing that we're working on, Sarah and I created a template for the ADU how-to guide. And Sarah's going to be working on populating that for a draft for you all to be looking at, because that 90-day window after that ordinance, what is it called, the appeal window or?
It's the 90-day prior to implementation. So it's closing.
Yes.
We're crawling towards the end.
So once that is, we'll want to be pushing out this information about where to get information about ADUs and to streamline people's understanding of what it is and how it might affect them if they're interested. So those are the priority areas that we're working on right now, among others. Anything else, Kristen?
Oh, she does have her hand.
No, that's okay.
All right, John, do you have an update on development code?
Oh, yeah, I reached out, talking to Jacob Martin, I believe his name is, a developer, builder with that property on Third Street, where they tore an existing house down to see what his problems were. And of course, it's sewer. The cost of running sewer for him is extreme. He's already over $60,000 into the project with the litigation of the asbestos and cleanup and everything. So he's kind of on hold, doesn't know what to do, sell it, build a house. He's not even sure where he's gonna go yet. I told him maybe we could hash out some stuff and see, but the problem is sewer. I mean, there's just not a lot we can do east of town until we get upgraded sewer systems, which is terrible because that's our buildable area. And even looking at the Zweifel property, if and when that does sell, there's gonna be an issue with that. So I don't know where we can step in to help. I don't see where our funding would do what needs to be done with our sewer by any realm.
One thing I can mention, I don't want to take your time. You go ahead.
Go ahead.
We know that there was that interagency infrastructure report that was produced last year by the state of Oregon that is available online. I'd like to go ahead and make sure that we get that out there. You had shared that to me in draft format before, so I have it in my email. I'll get it out to you all so you can read it. What that says, the punchline is that the state will be providing some dollars for infrastructure, and the bipartisan infrastructure law from the federal government is going to be a lot of where that money comes from over the next couple of years. Now, this is not the right now opportunity that we're looking for, but it does allow us to sort of stack out a pipeline of opportunities moving forward and thinking very intentionally through our I&I. So another thing to mention is that there's something called an I&I report that looks at infill and infiltration for stormwater as well as sewer. That report will be coming through the city here very soon. I think Megan and Tommy could speak to that more in detail. But once we have that and we have engineers who can say, here's what you can do with some money, and here's what you absolutely can't do until you rip things out and do something comprehensive, that will allow us to identify which of those properties actually could come online and which ones would be eligible for those funding tools that we know are coming down the pipeline. So we'll get that report out there and we'll start talking within the finance committee about getting some information out once we know that there's some funding available for infrastructure. I want to mention that rural communities are absolutely on the radar of the state. We're not the only rural community in this community.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah. And that's pretty much all I have.
Miss, do you have anything else on finance?
No, but I'm gonna take the time real quick to just encourage folks maybe between now and the next meeting that if you didn't, I was gonna go and look for things to put under staff between now and the next meeting, because I know there are probably some. So maybe that would be something we could all take a moment to do.
And remember, there are heavy hitting ones, right? The stuff that's gonna make a huge impact in the community that we know we want to do are also the things that might have gentrification impacts. So be bold about coming up with cool ideas and things that have an impact, but also be honest with ourselves about where it falls on the spectrum.
All right, well, it's down to legislative committee. I have a 2-pager for you that I kind of distributed. I just wanted to highlight, there were 4 bills that we wanted to kind of bring to everybody's attention. Both Trevor and myself worked on this, and we did receive some great feedback from the city of Tillamook. There are a PH scheduled, which means public hearing. A WS is a work schedule, is a workshop. So just to know that, and I would kind of bolded any bills that were by Javity, Representative Javity or Senator Weber. But 4 bills that we're kind of bringing out to our attention that we thought were very interesting. One was House Bill 3138, it's currently in the Joint Committee on Ways and Means. It appropriates money, grant money specifically for Regional Rural Revitalization Strategies Consortium. So it's a regional solution team specifically geared towards rural rejuvenation. So I think it'll be more, I haven't read in depth about it, but it's something of interest that we wanted to kind of highlight today. Another one is close, similar to, it's House Bill 3268. It's also in Joint Ways and Means, and it was Representative Javity. And it establishes a rural SDC program within housing and community development to pay for SDC charges and for rural affordable family housing. Now, the fact that it does say rural affordable housing, it may be geared to where lower income wages or lower income are, I think, less than 80% AMI structures. But it is a very positive note, and it was a pretty sizable ask. House Bill 406, I'm not gonna touch it again. And the other one was Senate Bill 1013, which I brought up previously. I see it as a gateway. It allows for if you have a single family home in a rural residential property, you can have a permanently placed RV. I see it as a gateway to homeowners that are looking not sure if an ADU is right for them, but maybe this might be a temporary solution to test the waters and get a little rent income and maybe dive into an ADU at a later time. So, and that actually made it through this, and it's in House Housing and Homelessness Committee. It made it through the Senate, and it received great support from the Clackamas County Commissioners. So there was some pretty sizable people out there that were backing this bill, or at least putting it in their letters of support. There were 2 that we just got some feedback from the city of Tillamook, and we kind of agree. There were some House Bill 3414 and 35169. Both are in House rules, so they might be going there to die. We're not sure, but technically they're still alive. And it really was about, it takes away a lot of local control that the cities have on where housing would be placed within the city. And that was very concerning to the planners, that they could be placing a single family dwelling in maybe a high density area. Kind of the opposite of what those high density areas are meant to be. So that was just bringing those up for concern. And so, and just to call out, a lot of these ones in Ways and Means, we'll start seeing some action, I think the week of May, I want to say it's like the 15th. That week, we will be seeing the, oh goodness, it's the state of the economy in Oregon is a report about what monies are gonna be available, to be doled out. The Ways and Means will be taking that up, and so we will start seeing a lot of momentum. After that point, we'll see more bills, especially if they're money asks. Those are all currently in a joint Ways and Means committee, waiting on to find out what kind of funding is gonna be available, where they can dole out the dollars, so. That's kind of where we're at. Is there any questions?
Can we just thank Legislative Committee for their incredible work, and in particular, Carrie, not only taking on chair, but the chair of the Legislative Committee and still accomplishing this. This is no small feat. Thank you.
Well, and luckily have Megan, who took some time and got some feedback, and then also Trevor. Kristen, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I guess you're referring to a handout that was not submitted to us electronically. I want to ask everybody from now on, if you're going to be giving handouts, even if it's at the last minute, please send it electronically as well, because it really puts online attendees at a disadvantage. We can't tell what you're talking about.
And this one, I will squarely put on me. I was preparing this presentation this morning. I forgot a couple of things, and our staff actually was here to help bail me out with some things I left on the printer as well. So my apologies. I will get this to your inboxes today so that you have that. This is really just informational so that you know what Legislative Committee is doing, but nonetheless, it's absolutely important you have that in hand. Thank you.
And it's on our legislative OneDrive,
That's right. It's on the OneDrive as well.
on the legislative committees.
Right.
Section.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, all right, now we have an opportunity for public comment. And is there anybody that would like, of the public here?
I would like to speak. Hi, everybody. The reason why I came here today is because last summer we applied for the STR grant program. And preference was given to projects that were already under construction, which we qualified. And those are also the projects that it's most critically time sensitive. And it's been 10 months and we haven't been funded. And I've also noticed that in the numbers that we're using to describe how many units you funded and how much money you guys have provided, our project is included. But we haven't received a final contract yet. And it's been incredibly difficult. Honestly, we're losing credibility with our creditors, moving money around in our budget, and buying things on our credit cards that we meant to buy so that we can pay off our creditors. And so something's gone wrong.
I can speak to that, Kevin, and I emailed you this morning. I hope you had an opportunity to see that. Commissioner Scar was also on that email, as well as Director Absher. So just a clear note, we approved a grant for Kevin, and the only applicant at that time who very clearly said that they would like a loan was Darren Murphy up in North County. So from the very beginning, we crafted Darren's project as a loan and Kevin's project as a grant. That grant went through county council. I worked incredibly hard to get that out the door. Once it was approved by county council, it then went to Kevin's desk, and Kevin said, "I'd like to have a loan instead." And because the structure of a loan and a grant are entirely different, I then had to rip that open and bring it back to the ground 1-0, and then actually put it back through county council, go through the entire process. Loans are much more complicated than grants, but because of the tax benefits that come along with a loan, Kingfisher expressed that it was worth that effort. I was very clear, I felt, in expressing that that would take some additional time. That wasn't something that can happen overnight. That was about a month and a half ago. 2 months ago, I took 2 weeks off for personal reasons as well, as I mentioned earlier, but that does not, that's not really a long time frame from the time that we said, let's go ahead and restart with a loan. Just so folks know very clearly, and Kevin, I shared this with you in your email this morning, and Commissioner Scar and Director Absher also were aware of that and saw that. So the delay was really in the request and the change. And that is ready to go. As I said in my email this morning, that is going in front of Board of County Commissioners tomorrow to then put on the agenda for next week. So we have finally made it through ripping apart that loan and building it back up to the point that the grant was when it was ready for Board of County Commissioners a couple months ago.
Really comment to that, and I brought a copy of the contract. It's 13 pages. It's essentially a fill in the blank document. I appreciate that it's so simple. That's great from our perspective, but it doesn't explain why it took 7.5 months, 8 months, however long it took to get to.
So Kevin, I'm gonna stop you right there. And as Commissioner Starr has already said, this is really a conversation you should be having directly with her. I appreciate you sharing this with the Housing Commission, but I don't think, especially with the details of the contract, I think we can continue to get you your contract. And then you've given some great feedback about potential changes to the process in the future, which I know we're all going to take to heart. But is there anything else you would like to share with the commission today?
Yeah, give me the second to process that and think, I think
Thank you.
there's
Appreciate it.
a lot that I'd like to discuss.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I really think it's important that, well, for instance, when I had an issue with our bank, taking exception to language in the state grant that we received and exception to the tax exemption ordinance, this board, this committee, acted as an advocate for our project, as a representative, not only of the county, but also, as an advocate for us to sort of work through the issues we were having and help with that interaction with both the state, the county, and our bank. And I'm basically here to ask this committee to play that role again, help me interface with the county. Because frankly, there's issues, I'm having a hard time being heard. And it's taking a long time. So yeah, I think that's really the primary reason why I came here.
Thank you. And I think we'll definitely take that into heart, and if there's anything specific that in regards to the process, especially with a change, I definitely think we would want to receive that feedback.
And that's what I came here for.
Possibly in an email form to the finance committee. I mean, if you want to send it to TJ.
So Carrie, I can mention that Aaron did meet, Commissioner Scar met directly with Kevin specifically about changes that he would like to see.
Sure.
Commissioner Scar shared those with me, and that information will come to the finance committee this month
Okay.
when we revisit
Okay.
this. I do want to encourage this committee to continue to play that advocate role. I also want to lift up and acknowledge that I prepared within a couple of days the full presentation and pulled together the people who went to that Columbia Bank presentation to save that tax exemption ordinance. And so that was through our collaborative leadership, and I hope that we can continue to do that. Thank you.
Right, exactly, and that's the same sort of strategy or process I'd like to see with this, whatever's holding up this project. Now, one of the, I think a good example is I've spoken with you, TJ, very specifically about needing my bank to look at the final draft contract. So scheduling me with the Board of County Commissioners is a moot point until we can get my bank in on the conversation.
So Kevin, again, I think that this conversation is going outside of the forum of the commission. So why don't you two maybe after this meeting connect? We can make sure we get that to you. Carrie, I prefer we move on, please.
Yes, and
Thank you.
is there anybody else for public comment today? All right, hearing that, we will adjourn. Oh,
Sorry, I know we're over time. Just quickly, I'm trying to understand what the county funding resources are. And I'm aware, of course, of the multifamily rental housing fund, and that's what Ms. and the finance committee is working on, getting that structure and framework put together. I was looking at the county's financial statements, the audited financial statements, and I didn't see that fund in the financial statements. As you know, it's a 200+ page document, so I may well have missed it. Do we see financial statements for that particular fund showing beginning balance, revenues, expenses, and what the assets are of that fund?
So actually, Dave, I can answer that. So it's my understanding you also have a call into County Treasurer Sean Blanchard. Has she gotten back to you yet? Okay, she's going to be doing that very soon. You know, we're in the throes of the budget hearings. So the short-term rental operator license fee is a special revenue fund. It's Revenue Fund 122. And in that, it has the revenue for the operator license fee. It has the grant awards for the Brownfield project, House Bill 4123, and a few other things that are money that we've received specifically for housing. And so that special revenue fund structure has just now, as far as formalizing it into a budget for the Housing Commission, for the coordinator position and others, that is part of the budget for this year. So I would recommend, if you haven't looked at community development's budget sheets yet, you will see 122 in our budget packet. The treasurer has been collecting and accounting for those funds that have been held outside of the general fund, because they are not part of the general fund, they are for housing. And so those sheets, she should be able to answer your questions and get you what you need.
Great.
Okay.
So just quickly, then, there's also, what I found in the financial statements, a community development workforce housing fund with $1.7 million in it. Is that the same fund you're referring to? Or is that a different fund?
That might be what she's calling it, as Fund 122. Does it have the numbers on it?
It doesn't. I don't think so. But I saw that $1.7 million and I thought, wow, that's a lot of money.
There's not that much in there.
And it included this last year, for the year ending June 30th, 2022, it included $1 million intergovernmental transfer. So
So that is House Bill 4123. It is the Brownfield. There's more than just
That's
the
the Brownfield?
operator license fee in there.
We got $1.5 million just between 4123 and Brownfield, so
That's
that
right.
makes sense. Sounds like actually there might be some money somewhere else that needs to go into that too, because I think there's more dollars coming in. That's your.
Well, right. So we've cut some of the checks for the grants already. So yes, so it's Special Revenue Fund 122 is the code for that.
we got that plus the special, the other fund that.
Nope, that is in 122.
Oh, it is.
Yes, that is in one. So like just as mentioned, yeah, so the short-term rental operator fees, 4120, House Bill 4123 funding, Brownfield grant awards, all of that goes into 122 because that is for housing.
But I think the distinction here is that those are not under the purview of the Housing Commission.
That is
what I
correct.
hear you asking for is the funds that are under our purview, can we be getting some sort of a statement on maybe a quarterly or biannual basis or something to give us some sense of, which I guess I'm adding words to your question that are based on what I would like to see out of this, because I think that is a good, we've been kind of dancing around the STRO, balance the last cycle, the initial cycle. And it was like, so how much is in there? How much is in there? Well, we gotta wait and see. We gotta wait and see. I feel like that there should be a level of transparency around that, the reporting of that fund, if we're responsible for, making allocations out of it.
Absolutely. Yep, we can do that. And part of that, Michelle, just to answer that question, when that request came, we had gone from the quarterly payments to the annual anniversary payments, so I didn't have a full projection at that time. But now I do. So yes, I will talk to the treasurer and see what we can get for you. Happy to do that. Yep. And she and I talked 2 nights ago, so I know she's getting ready to call you.
All right, well, we will adjourn this meeting. 11:15.
It's all hard work, everyone. Hey.